Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Visibility Factor podcast. This is Sue Barber, your host. I'm so excited to bring two guests to you today who have written an amazing book. It's called Interview Speak. My guests are Laura Browne and Barbara Limmer. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves and let's get into some conversation about this great book.
So I'm Laura Browne. I'm a speaker, I'm an author, I'm a coach. I have online training courses, and my focus is to help people be more successful at this job or at their next job. And I've been in corporate human resources for global technology companies for years. And so I know what goes on behind the scenes, and I can share the secrets. And I've written books on how to increase your salary, what to do if you lose your job and get laid off. I've been quoted as a business expert in Cosmo and Family Circle and USA Weekend, and I've written for Forbes. And I'm here today to make it easier for people to get their next job. So I'm super excited to be here, Sue. Thank you.
I've basically had two careers. So the first half of my career was in human resources. I worked for tech companies, financial services, and a major bank. And I was always involved in recruiting, interviewing, hiring, referring candidates to hiring managers, and making job offers. Then I switched into the career management side, where I worked at an international business school in their career management center, and then I went private doing career management coaching. And in that time, I was involved in mock interviews, where I would interview people based on a job description. I'd give them specific, detailed feedback on what worked and what didn't work. And that's the background that led us to writing this book.
Wow, both of you amazing careers and have done so much. I am really excited about this book. I loved it so much. And I'm curious, what made you decide to write this book?
Well, in my career as a coach doing mock interviews, I came to realize that most people think they do well in interviews. They walk away thinking they did great. And by the way, that's not always the case. And in doing my mock interviews, often I would have to redirect people because they were not answering the true question behind the question. So I often felt like I needed to translate for them. Here's what the real question is. And then the light bulb would go off and they'd say, now I know how to answer it. And then they would be much more successful and impactful in their answers.
Now, wait, can I add to that? Because I want to tell you, so Barbara and I have known each other for years and years and years. I'm not going to say how many, but it's been a lot. And so we kept talking about this, and we kept talking about interviews and what was going on behind the scenes. And so I kept saying, Barbara, I think there's a book here. And Barbara kept putting me off. And honest to goodness, I think I finally wore her down. And so she finally said, you know what, Laura, I think there is a book here. And then we started talking about it. And I'm so glad we did, because that's how Interview Speak was really started. Just talking about it and then thinking, you know what, this could really help people.
Yeah, I mean, the concept is amazing, honestly. And I think it's going to be a game changer for anybody who's going through an interview. Or I am curious, as an author myself, I always find it interesting to ask authors, what was the book writing process like for you guys?
Yeah, it was really fun. But what happened was interesting, because I've written a bunch of books, and Barbara hasn't. And so I said, okay, Barbara, put together, a bunch of things that you think we should write about, and then let's talk about it. So she put together this wonderful information, and it was about 80 pages, and she said, okay, we're done. So I laughed and I said, 80 pages isn't a book, it's a pamphlet. And so then we took those 80 pages and then we expanded it and we added more, because it was the bones of the great book. And so it was fun to work on it and sort of add it and make it better.
And Laura just had some amazing ideas from a creative standpoint. I mean, I put together what I consider the meat and potatoes. Here are the interview questions, here are the translations, here's how to answer them. But then we expanded the content, including examples and some other fun things, and a great deal of information on how best to prepare and how to deal with specific situations. Like we have a chapter, how to deal with a bad interviewer or a really good interviewer, because those can be really difficult.
If you handed your book to someone, what would they need to know to be really excited about it?
Well, I look at it as sort of a guide. Like if you went to another country and you wanted a a guidebook to help you navigate through the customs and the language barriers and all that kind of stuff. This is like that. It's translating interview speak, because if you really understand the true question behind the question, you're going to be in a much better position to be able to answer it. And it's not just about the question, it's getting into the mindset of what interviewers are really looking for.
And if I could add to that, what's really good about the book, I mean, there are many wonderful things. We make it kind of fun, because interviewing really isn't fun. Okay, job search is not fun, but it's an easy to read because we put in sentence diagrams, we pull apart sentences and explain, what does this really mean? We translate it. We actually have little comics that make it fun. We have examples, a bunch of examples where we ask somebody an interview question, they give a good answer, and then we say, what was good about the answer? And then we dissect it and we say, here are a couple of things that would make it a great answer. And then that way people can think, okay, I can just take one of two things. Maybe I can shorten my answer. I could add this and it will be a great answer. So we make it easier and fun for people to learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, who thinks about interviewing as being fun? So, I mean, turning it into a fun opportunity to learn, I think is great. I would love to hear an example of the question behind the question. I know you mentioned that.
Well, let's take the most common first question in an interview, which is, tell me about yourself. So at face value, people might think, okay, they want to get to know me, and I'll start with where I was born and where I grew up and where I went to high school. And that's not what they mean. That's actually going to put the interviewer to sleep, or do what I did for a number of years, and that is make my grocery list in my head as I am politely smiling and nodding and looking directly at the candidate. So what the question really is, before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell me things about you that specifically qualify you for this job. I'm only interested in the slice of your background that pertains to me. And also, here's an opportunity to showcase your communication skills, your ability to build rapport, and I'm going to be listening for any potential red flags along the way. So that's a lot, but you really have to kind of think through in advance and prepare. Out of everything you've done in your background, what are the key things you want this interviewer to know about you?
Yeah. I know that there are many hard questions that people are given in an interview. I would love to hear you talk about which ones you really cover in the book and any suggestions or ideas on how to handle.
Let me talk about some of the most common difficult questions, and then Barbara, maybe you can add to one of them. So we already talked about tell me about yourself, and everybody should be prepared for that because like 99% of interviews start with that. The next one we hear so often is, what are your strengths and weaknesses, or just what are your weaknesses? What are your career goals? What salary are you looking for? And also negative questions like, tell me about a failure you had, or describe a problem you were unable to solve, or talk about a decision you regretted after having made it. So what suggestions do you have, Barbara?
Well, let me take apart a couple of those. So the weakness question, that is one that a lot of people struggle with. And let me start by defining weakness, or saying what people might be asking, because I think what has happened is they avoid the word weakness in their question because that question has sort of been given a bad reputation. So instead of saying, what are your weaknesses? They'll say, give me something that you'd like to improve about yourself. Or they might ask from the perspective of someone else. For example, if I were to call your boss, what would they tell me are some of the things you could work on? I actually had a client tell me once, they were asked in a real interview, if you were to hire an executive coach, what 3 things would you want to work on with them? And I heard that and I went, aha, that's an interesting way of asking about weaknesses. So first of all, you might not be listening for the word weakness in the question, but the topic is the same. Secondly, a lot of the other interview books out there tell you, disguise your weakness as a strength. Well, you know what? Interviewers out there have heard all of those, what we call BS answers. Let me give you the top 3 BS answers. Oh, I'm a perfectionist. Really? Like I haven't been hearing that for the last 20 years. Oh, here's another one. I give every effort 110% and I get really frustrated when other people don't work as hard as me. Oh, yeah, really? Like that's a weakness. Third one that I've heard, work-life balance is something I really struggle with. And I hear that and think to myself, oh, great. You used to work your tail off for someone else. And now that I'm considering you, you want to leave every night at 5 o'clock. So those are answers to not give. So how do you answer it? Well, you have 2 options. Number 1, you can go back in time and think of something that was real that maybe didn't come as easily to you or you were given constructive criticism about. And you can use what we talk about in the book as a negative sandwich, meaning start with the positive, go into the negative, end on a positive. So for example, I'm really proud of this ability of mine. But you know what? Earlier in my career, I really struggled with that. And here's what I've done to improve that. And now what I do is this. The second option is to take a strength and think about under what circumstances might that strength actually be a weakness. And again, back to that negative sandwich. I'm really proud of this strength of mine. However, I've learned under this circumstance, it can actually be a weakness, and here's why. So here's what I do in those circumstances to compensate for that tendency.
Wow. Again, brilliance just flowing out of both of you. I think that is really great because it is the question I think most people fear.
I mean, the message is it's okay to not be perfect. And a really important goal in the interview is to build rapport with your interviewer. And one way to do that is to show some humility and to show the confidence to admit that you're not perfect and to take that opportunity to say, I know myself, and here's what makes me a great candidate for you, having gone through some of these struggles in the past. That's a good thing, not a bad thing.
Right? Yeah. So I'd love to just dive into the money question just for a moment because I do know how people struggle with that. I'm dying to hear your answers, Laura, because I know you wrote a whole book about this.
Yeah, and it's interesting because what I'm seeing more and more now is that in the job descriptions, some job descriptions actually show a salary. And there's some legal issues around that. And so sometimes companies are showing it. But there's still plenty of them that don't show it. And what tends to happen and what we get really nervous about is when the interviewer says, tell me what salary you're looking for. And you know why they're doing it. Because I want to find out, am I wasting time with you? And I'm going to tell you right now, one time I was in an interview and they asked, what's your salary? And they told me what their salary was and it was way too low. And I actually stopped the interview and I said, thank you. So they want to know, am I wasting time with you? Because I'm not going to push you forward if we're going to like you and then we're not going to be able to afford you. So here's what the answer is. Don't tell them a number if you can avoid it at all. What you want to do when they ask you that, and you should be prepared for this, and you should be able to say this calmly, say, can you tell me what the range is for this position? And then stop talking. And I have been surprised at how many people will tell you what the range is. And so if so, just say, either do what I did one time, which say, that won't work, or most of the time you'll say, that's within my range. Great, let's talk about something else. So basically, you're just trying to get past it. Now, sometimes they won't tell you what the range is. They'll push you like, yeah, we don't have a range, or just tell me what you want. Now, the expectation is you have done your homework beforehand, and so you know what a reasonable range is. And so you want to then, if you get pushed, give a range that's big enough that you would accept the bottom number, but you make the number big enough so there's some room in there. And so you might then say, well, based on the research I have done, what I have found, similar positions are making, X are making $100,000 to $150,000, and that would be my range. And so that gives them enough information, again, to keep moving you forward. Barbara, anything else you'd suggest there?
Well, I want to go back to a common theme that we weave throughout our book. It's about being real and not getting into any sort of game playing. So, what Laura said is absolutely true. And I want people to use that with the proper mindset. So it's not, oh, I'm not going to reveal a number. Why don't you tell me what your range is? No, it's from a place of ignorance. Look, I don't know anything about your salary ranges and your budget. Would you please tell me what your range is? See, it's a different kind of mindset and interaction. The other thing is, if they tell you a range and you're a little disappointed, don't let it show on your face, because the goal is you want to keep going. Let's get off the subject of money and let's get back to talking about what it is you need in this job and how I can help you. And by the way, when you have that job offer, you have a heck of a lot more leverage and you might be able to negotiate that up. So don't be disappointed. If it's far outside of your range, then you might want to do what Laura did and stop the interview. But if it's anywhere remotely close, just say, great, we're in the same ballpark. What else would you like to know about me?
You're trying to get them to love you first and say you are the perfect person, because then you can negotiate later.
Yeah.
One more thing I want to mention, I want to make a point of it. What Laura said, if you are forced to give a range, make sure you do what Laura said, and that is, based on other jobs I've seen, here's what an appropriate range appears to be. In other words, do not personalize it. Do not say, based on my experience, I would need at least X. Because guess what? That eliminates your ability to negotiate later. All you're saying is, here's what I've seen out there. And then once you have the job offer, it is about you and what you bring to the table.
Mm-hmm. So, and I just want to ask one more question that I've heard quite a bit. What is your current salary? And I've always found that to be a challenge, because especially for women who are probably not getting paid what they should be getting paid already, is it redirect to here's the salary response instead?
Just because they ask doesn't mean you have to give that.
Yes, redirect.
And it really is irrelevant. So again, translating, what is your current salary? The translation is what Laura said earlier. I'm concerned that I might not be able to afford you, so let's get this out of the way and talk about it right now. So if you are asked, what is your current salary? You can say, make up some excuse like, oh, my salary has been all over the board. It's, I get a combination of base and bonus. So look, if what you're interested in learning is what my desired range is, let me tell you, here's the range of the jobs I see out there. See what I mean? So just because they ask my salary doesn't mean I have to answer it that way. I can convert and give salary data that I've seen.
Yeah. I love that you're giving people permission to be real and also to not answer the question exactly as it's given to you. In your book, you have a little person in there named Clueless Clark who, might not always be doing the right thing and might be doing it unintentionally. And so I'd love you to describe Clueless Clark and what is his role in the book?
Well, so let me answer that. So he initially wasn't in the book. We knew that we had characters in the book that we were going to ask questions and review their answers. But we were about halfway through the book and we had some early reviewers and they said they loved the examples, wanted more, so we put more in. And they said, but we want some bad examples. We said, really? We were a little surprised by that. And so we talked and we came up with Clueless Clark, who always makes mistakes and always thinks he does a great job and never gets the next interview. And so we started playing with it. We started thinking about bad examples we had seen and we put them in. We're trying to make it fun to read. But the point is, he really messes things up. And what we do with his answers is we look at what was bad and why was it bad? Because we want people to really understand why they shouldn't do this in the future. And so we follow Clueless Clark, and spoiler alert, he learns things later on. But it's really, really fun because people really like Clueless Clark because they realize we all make mistakes and we all need to learn from them.
And we allow readers to learn from his mistakes because we not only say, here's what he got wrong, but here's what he should have said.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do want to make a comment because some people might think that Clueless Clark is exaggerated. But they need to know that we've had people say, oh my gosh, I've interviewed Clueless Clark before. I have heard those answers. One person even said, I was Clueless Clark, and after reading your book, now I know what I did wrong, and I've learned from it. And by the way, in my last interview, I used these lessons I learned from your book and got a job offer, and he's now working at that company. So that's pretty cool. A way to inject fun into what some people might think is not a very fun topic.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it, right? Through someone else's examples and stories and helping people understand that there is a difference and how to do it in the best way. I want to go back to one thing you said. It's still a little shocking that you are sitting there while people are interviewing with you thinking about your grocery list. When someone's in front of you and they're interviewing and they're trying to do their best, and I think about it as they're trying to read you just as much as you're trying to read them.
You know, a lot of people assume that they'll be able to read the interviewer's face on whether they're doing well. And that's not always the case. There are a number of interviewers whose modus operandi, if you will, is poker face. So you could be doing really well and not know it because they're a poker face. And, you know, I said that once to a client, and an executive client said, oh yeah, I do that. I don't know why people do it, but they do. I once worked for a VP of HR who had the opposite. Her whole MO was to smile and laugh and be engaging. And everybody walked out of their interviews with her thinking they did wonderfully. And then I would go in and talk to my boss to say, well, what did you think? And she'd say, oh, thumbs down. So again, just because you think you're doing really well doesn't necessarily mean you are. So it kind of goes back to understanding the question behind the question so that you can give the interviewer what they're looking for. Get out of your own head. It's not, for example, what are you looking for in your next job? Don't just say what you're really looking for in your next job. You're not talking to a friend. You're talking to an employer who is trying to decide whether to hire you. So what are you looking for in your next job? Your answer should include those things that were taken right.
So it's interesting. I want to get back to what's inside the head of the interviewer, because they're scared. They're scared because they need to fill this position. And they need to find somebody that, first of all, is going to do a good job and is not going to want to quit in 6 months or a year. And so you have to think about, I must convince you that not only do I want a job, because of course you want a job because you're there, and do I want this job, but I'll be able to do it, and I'm excited about it, and I'm passionate about it, and I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to do a fabulous job. So when the interviewer moves them to the manager or somebody else, the manager is going to go back to them and say, thanks for moving that candidate. That candidate is great. So again, you have to really convince this person you love the job, you're perfect for it, and you will stay and do your best job there. So again, get out of your head and get into their head.
Because they think, okay, my job in the interview is to convince them that I qualify for the job. That's only one part of it. It's also that you're dying to do this job. And again, people think, well, wait a minute, I wouldn't be here interviewing if I wasn't interested in the job. Yeah, but that's not a foregone conclusion. You still must convince the interviewer not only that you can do the job, but that you really want this job and that you will fit their culture. And again, that's where preparation plays a part in doing as much research as you can into the company and their culture and what kind of people do well at that type of company.
What would you advise someone who is going into a company and they may not be a good fit? They have some of the requirements, but not all of them. How would you advise them?
Well, in the book, we actually show people how to use the job description to prepare for the interview. So you need to really go through that job description with a fine-tooth comb, and not just the qualifications, but what is the person in this job going to be doing and think through, if you haven't done those exact same things, what if you're asked a question? Tell me about your experience doing X. And instead of being a deer in the headlights, I haven't done X, your preparation is, all right, I haven't done X exactly, but here's what I've done that's very similar. So you are selling yourself as someone who has all of the qualifications, if not exactly, in a very similar way, using the same skills. And that preparation is also looking at not just the required qualifications, but the desired qualifications, because a lot of times a job posting will say that, preferred but not required. Guess what? You still might be asked about those preferred qualifications, and you think through, well, what experience have I had that is related to this?
From the inside view, just because it says it's required doesn't actually mean it's required. Now, you should be prepared for it, but if you're thinking, man, I don't have all of the qualifications, if you're in an interview, they're interested in you. Now, you need to do all the things that Barbara said, but I've seen plenty of times in companies where, applicant A had all of the required qualifications. Applicant B didn't, but they liked applicant B better for some reason. And I thought, but they're a better fit in different ways, and we can teach them this. So let's hire this person. So the reason I say this, I don't want you to get put off because I don't have everything, but do your homework so you can pitch it the best you can and show why you are the best match.
It's funny, I've had clients sometimes say, I can do that job in my sleep. And I hear that and go, you better not be showing that in the interview. Because again, someone with 110% of the qualifications who knows it is not going to get the offer over someone who has only 80% of the qualifications and is dying to do this job.
You never know when you're going in. And obviously that's why you're going to try and do your best and explain why you have all the required, qualifications and the preferred qualifications or something similar. But just know, even if you don't, you still have a shot at it. And you still want to, again, use the questions and use the answers that we give to do your best job possible.
Well, and you're balancing confidence with humility. So the people who can do this job in their sleep often come across as arrogant. And people find a reason to say, they, on paper, they're a great fit, but I don't know, there was something about them in the interview. I just can't put my finger on it. Whereas this other person, oh my gosh, everyone loved them. So again, it's okay to not be perfect. You're human. Be real, be authentic, be honest and candid, because if they feel like they're getting to know you, they will trust you. And they just might hire you. Someone that they don't trust, they're not going to hire.
What about the people who interview in a fantastic way, and then when they come into the organization, they don't do so well?
So that's the interviewer nightmare. And so again, the interviewer is thinking, if it's happened to them, obviously then they're going to be gun shy. They're always fearful that I'm going to hire somebody and they're not going to.
I'm kind of stuck on the word you use, Sue, about, if they're a really fantastic interviewee. And I thought to myself, yeah, but is that real, or are they almost too polished? And these days, it is incredibly common for companies to put candidates through multiple interviews. And, you're interviewing with not only your boss, but their boss, your peers, your direct reports, so that they're getting opinions from everybody. So it's not just, oh, wow, this person gave really good answers. And then you have to get into the mindset, and we have a chapter on that with the different interviewers and what their mindset is, so that you know how to connect with them and what they're really looking for. Like, a direct report might be thinking, are you going to make my job easier or harder if you come in as my new boss? So again, to me, perfect answers, there's no such thing. And perfect answers means something's wrong. They might be giving me memorized answers, or they're following a script, or heck, these days they might be plugging interview questions into AI and memorizing what AI says to give. And I think interviewers have gotten really good at differentiating the fake answers from the real answers.
I've interviewed a couple of candidates, and the manager picks who I think is the wrong person. And I have pushed back and I've said, let me tell you what I think the problems are going to be. And then the problems show up, just what you said. So the person comes in, they don't do it. And of course, I never said to the manager, well, I told you so. But I talk about, okay, it was this answer or this, or when they did this, that gave me a red flag. And I think that's a problem. So sometimes, the managers are going to pick somebody that we don't agree with, or that the interviewer doesn't agree with. And it's up to the interviewer to sort of help the managers to see, let's not do this next time.
And they will learn from their mistakes, because then that turns into a nightmare for them.
Of course. Oh my gosh. So you made me think of another question. I would love to hear your take on panel interviews. I had a client who had 5 people on the panel, all different levels. How does an interviewee handle that?
Well, the preparation is the same. So everything we talk about, the job description, the company research, none of that changes. My advice would be get the panel names and job functions in advance. You now have this great tool available to you, and that is LinkedIn. Look them up. What is their background? Get to know them as much as possible before your panel interview. And then in the panel, it could be a challenge because different people are giving different kinds of questions based on their perspective, but it's okay to pause after you hear a question, think through how best to answer it, and remember, one of the goals is build rapport with all 5 people. Look them in the eye. I've had clients in panel interviews do what I call drive-by eye contact, where they're not really landing on any one person. They're trying to look at everybody at once. That's not building a human connection with people. So whoever is answering the question, direct your answer to them and look at other people. Look at them, stop, and land.
Panel interviews are difficult, but they are here to stay. And so one of the things that Barbara said I want to add on to, that you want to make sure that you create a connection with everybody, because there's a tendency, there's a senior manager in there, I am going to focus on him or her and talk to that senior manager. Yeah, but it might be the person, in the corner, the 5th person, the one that gets to say no. And so it's really important to connect with all of them, as you say, as you're answering. And also, one of the things we talk about in the book is make sure that you have questions at the end. And so if there is time, I would certainly make sure that my questions include all of the people. And one of my favorite questions is to ask, well, tell me what brought you to the company, and what do you love about working at the company? You have to connect with the whole panel, otherwise somebody can say no to you.
You can bet there will be a debrief meeting where whoever the hiring manager is going to gather the opinions of everybody on that panel.
I think there's just a lot of things happening in that experience that you have to be ready for. Is there anything that you want to share that we didn't talk about?
Well, I just want to say that prepare, prepare, prepare. Okay, that to me is the biggest message. And it's funny because people have said to me, Clueless Clark people have said to me, no, I want to be authentic. I just want to show up and be me. And you can still be authentic and you can show up and be you, but you should be prepared, because otherwise you're going to end up, first of all, it's going to be totally stressful because you're going to think, what do I say now? As an interviewer, what if they say to me, well, the first thing that comes to mind is this, I think, oh, you didn't prepare. Don't give me the first. Give me your best answer. And so it's really important that you prepare, you show up the best you can, and show up as you. And I just want to make sure whether you use our book, which of course I suggest you do, or do something else, just practice on your phone, practice with a friend, you need to be as prepared as you possibly can so you have the best interviews and you feel good about them afterwards.
I think about giving presentations. What did I used to do to prepare for those presentations? Oh my God, I would study, I would know my notes backwards and forwards. And the whole point was so that when I was in the moment giving the presentation, I would appear as if I know this stuff like the back of my hand. And I could be more relaxed and more present. And the same is true in interviewing. So preparation does not mean memorizing scripts. It means thinking through your background, thinking through the job description, doing research on the company so that by the time you show up to the interview, you can say, I know this stuff, I've got this. And by the way, if they ask me a question I've never heard about before, I can stop and think through it. It's okay to pause. It's not okay to pause if they ask you, so why are you interested in this job? Let me think about that. But if they ask you, one of my favorites is, if you were a superhero, what would your special power be and why? And they ask that because they want to get to know you. You might stop and say, oh my gosh, I've never been asked that before. Let me think about that. Again, it's okay. You're human. And I've had people say, wait, could I restart? I'm a little nervous. It's okay. You're human. You're real. That is actually a positive in terms of building rapport with the other reviewer, as opposed to being too polished and robot-like.
So I hope everyone's hearing the be real, be authentic, do your homework, prepare, plan, and read their book. You can find it online. And as a special gift for my listeners, you are getting a special discount code to use, which I will also put in the show notes for you. Their publisher has been gracious enough to offer that.
Don't wait until you have an interview to get the book, because guess what? You might be invited for an interview in 2 days and there's no time. So get the book now if you expect to be interviewing at any point in the future so that you can be prepared.
Okay, so we're going to transition into what I call the Rise Up and Be Visible quick tips. These are 4 questions that I ask every guest. For the first question, what do you think visibility is and why did you answer that way?
Well, the first, my most important answer there is visibility is essential. But what also pops into my head is visibility is scary. So, if you're not used to it, if you're not getting yourself out there, it's scary. However, it is so important to let people know what you're doing for you and for them. So essential.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to get out of my comfort zone in this because honestly, I didn't post much on LinkedIn before. And now I'm posting videos of myself. And I'm not showing a private versus public persona. It's me. And we're real. And anyone who watched our unboxing video saw that in the middle of it, the phone fell. And we left that in because we thought it was funny. So be real and allow people to get to know you in your visibility efforts.
What are you guys doing to be visible? I love the videos that you're doing, but what else do you want to share?
So in my kitchen, I have a little sign that says, what can I do today that my future self will thank me for? And normally it's not, just sit around and watch movies, even though that's what I would really like to do. So when I think about what my future self will thank me for, it's about getting the word out and getting the message out to help more people. And so just like Barbara said, what I've been doing is posting more videos, which is really uncomfortable because I'd rather write it all because I am a writer. So when I think about, what my tip is for people is push yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone and think, in a year, what will I be happy I did?
And you can frame it in your own mind. Like sometimes in my life, I have to make a decision to think about something in a certain way. So for example, posting videos, I could choose to think, oh my gosh, but that's scary. I prefer to help others, not show myself. Well, but I'm choosing to think about it as it's fun, it's exciting. Laura and I are so excited about our book. We're very proud of it. We know it will help a lot of people. And that's the way I'm choosing to think about putting myself out there.
When I was writing my book and this author told me that if you write a good book, you have a responsibility to put yourself out there and talk about it so that people can find it. Imagine somebody sees your videos and recognizes that they need your book. So what is the best leadership or career advice you've received?
So I was told, don't assume other people know what you're doing. And I knew that, but then it was the second part, which is, and why it matters. So explain what's obvious to you, but may not be obvious to other people. So for example, if you're talking about a project and you say, I'm working on this project and it's going well, the other person might go, uh-huh. And then you might say, and I'm sure you know this, but this project will mean this, this, and this for the company, and will mean this, this, and this for our team. Now, suddenly you've translated it, and they realize, oh, that's why this is important. So explaining what's obvious to you and what's not obvious to other people, that was a key thing for me.
That is true for job interviews as well. And so you have to say not just here's what I did, but here's why it mattered. Here's how it benefited the company or the team. The advice that I would share is that I was actually told once as a coach, it's okay to not have all the answers. Again, I feel like a broken record. It's about being real and being human. So sometimes a client might ask me something and I don't know, and I say so. Or I'll say, well, let me do some further research, but here's my initial take on that. So again, that same advice is true in a job interview as well. You don't have to be right all the time. In fact, I think there's no such thing as being right. It's about being real.
What is a book you would recommend to the audience?
Well, one of my favorite authors is Martha Beck, and she's written some just wonderful books. And she came out with a new book this year on anxiety because so many people are anxious. So it's called Beyond Anxiety, Curiosity, Creativity, and Finding Your Life's Purpose. And I highly recommend it. She's got some really good ideas in there to make it sort of easier to get through the anxious times.
And the book that I just read was actually an autobiography. It was Barbara Streisand's book called My Name is Barbara. And it was quite an accomplishment for me because it was almost 1,000 pages long, but I loved it. And to me, that was the utmost in being visible because she allowed the readers to really get to know her and what she was thinking when she was singing certain songs or making certain movies. So I loved it, and it allowed me to feel almost like I was getting close to her.
I love that because, I think about her and she had a lot of stage fright, and getting up on stage was really hard for her. My father loved her, so I get to hear a lot of Barbara Streisand growing up, and what an amazing voice. Oh my gosh.
I highly recommend that book then because it was just fabulous.
So how can everybody get in touch with you if they'd like to find you?
Oh, LinkedIn. So I'm Laura Browne with an E at the end. So go ahead, go to LinkedIn. You can also go to my website, which is Career Coffee Break, because I give ideas and suggestions in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee.
And the best way to get in touch with me also is LinkedIn, Barbara Limmer. It's like Slimmer without the S. That's how you spell my last name. And I'm very easy to find. And I would invite your listeners to reach out and message us and tell us what you think of the book. We're very excited that it's out there, and we would love to interact with your listeners.
Yeah, we would love to hear from them. And if they tell us, hey, we just heard you on the Visibility podcast, we would love to say hi to them.
Yes, so please reach out. This was just an amazing conversation, so insightful. You're giving the real insider's guide for everybody to be able to use and take advantage of. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Sue, for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to chat with your listeners and help them.
Yes, thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much for joining today on the Visibility Factor podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.